Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Autism in Action podcast. Today, we have got an amazing interview lined up with Miss Marcel Champ, with AKA her pen name, Samantha Craft. And she does so much work, guys. She is a senior recruiter and outreach specialist with Ultranauts out of New York. And she does so much other stuff in our community. You are currently in Washington State, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm in
Okay.
the city of Olympia. We're about 60 miles south of Seattle.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know that we're on a big time zone difference with me being in South Carolina and you being in Washington State, but I am so grateful for the internet and the ability to connect with you today and
Me
just
too.
get all this amazing information out to our listeners. So if you don't mind, just take a moment and start, share whatever's on your heart to share first.
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me here. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your work in the autism community and with your clients. As you said, my legal name is Marcel Champion, and many people know me by my pen name, Samantha Craft. I'm the author of the blog and book Everyday Aspergers. I started the blog about 8 years ago and ended up contacting and reaching individuals on the spectrum around the world and their supporters. I'm also a co-contributor author to the book Spectrum Women Walking to the Beat of Autism. I wrote about parenting in my chapter. And my main hat that I wear as a vocation at this time for my job is a senior recruiter, as you mentioned, and it's for a company that's based out of New York, New York. We used to be called Ultra Testing. We just changed to Ultranauts, like astronauts, Ultranauts. And what I do largely for that job is recruit individuals who are on the autism spectrum or similar profiles, adults, to work from home as software testers across the United States, and we're moving into Canada. They're employees of the company, and we provide I think a very fair starting wage at $17.50 an hour.
Wow.
And have a neurodiversity hiring initiative. 75% or more of our software testers are on the autism spectrum. And when I first started working there, we had 5 testers, and now we're approaching 55, 60, and we'll more than likely be hiring 50 to 100 more testers in the next couple of years. So we're excited about the expansion and providing some opportunities for very talented, capable, skilled individuals. I also am their outreach specialist, so I do calls like this one with you, and interviews and articles and conferences and keynotes, all different types of things throughout the United States and Canada. I also go internationally online through similar venues as this and talking about autism, empowerment, employment, neurodiversity practices. And in addition, I've recently teamed up with my vocational partner, J. David Hall, and he is the founder and CEO of NeuroGuides, and you had him on as a guest. Thank you very much. He really enjoyed that. And he works with vocational and life coaching for adults on the spectrum. And so I help with that. And we also travel together to for-profit agencies and government agencies, teaching about inclusiveness in the workplace and what that looks like, and how to include everyone in the workplace and not single out one individual as needing help, but how everyone can benefit from highlighting their strengths and challenges and how we can help each other. I think that's most of what I do for vocations. I'm sure I'm probably forgetting something. I have a dog that keeps me pretty busy.
Did you mention the Everyday Aspergers?
Yes, I'm the author of the blog and book Everyday Aspergers, and that was actually a project that was 10 years in the making. It's taken from a 1,000-page blog of my writings when I discovered I was autistic, Asperger's at that time. About 8 years ago, I started writing to process that experience and what it was like for me. My middle son, who is now 20, he was diagnosed with Asperger's from the UC Davis Mind Institute in California when he was about 4 or 5 years old. So I've had a lot of experience and time with the topic of autism and Asperger's and similar conditions. But having been diagnosed myself in later years, that was an entirely different experience. And so I ended up journaling and processing that quite a bit. And then it resonated with a lot of women on the spectrum. I am am happy to say that my list of traits for females on the autism spectrum has been translated into many different languages and used as a diagnostic tool in different countries, including the UK and Ecuador and Mexico. So that's been really encouraging. We've seen a lot in the last 8 years shift with more and more women recognizing the traits of being on the spectrum. A lot of parents who don't realize it at first, mothers
Right.
that have sons or daughters or children on the spectrum, they don't realize it at first, and then they start to get to know other adults on the spectrum and recognize some similarities.
Right. Well, I just think that what you guys do is absolutely amazing. It's such a wide array of different things that you guys contribute to the field. One of the things that I absolutely love that you state on your website in regards to the values that you guys have is the us culture. So I would like to touch on that for just a moment. I think that that's so important.
Thank you. That came about several years ago when I was doing some of my outreach calls, and before I would disclose that I was on the spectrum to another professional on the other end, maybe an autism organization, they started using the they language. Well, all we need to do is get them, or they just need to, they just need soft skill training. They just need communication skills. They just need, and at that time I usually would very politely and professionally disclose, I'm on the autism spectrum. And just because someone's on the spectrum doesn't necessarily mean they fit into a specific box. For example, I've been studying communication and psychology since I was little. That's not something that I need training and more experience in. In fact, I communicate and have healthy communication practices that are sometimes better than my neurotypical peers. So I try to break those stereotypes. And one of the ways I do that is by encouraging the use of us and we instead of they and them. That's another reason I say when we're talking about autism or talking about autistic people themselves specifically, that I always encourage people to bring in the autistic voice like you are by bringing me here today, because it makes it a more inclusive language. We're talking about me and my children and us, and we're not talking about them.
Right.
The way I explained it to some of the some executives that I've worked with before, some leaders, is that if we were going to have a presentation about females in the workplace and how they needed to have a larger voice and be more empowered, or perhaps how can we help them feel that way, we wouldn't put a panel of men up on stage to talk about what it's like to be a female and how to support females in the workplace. Likewise, if we were speaking of a particular color of people, an ethnicity, minority based on color, and we, for example, we wanted to know how people that were Black could feel more empowered and have a voice in the workplace, we wouldn't put a panel of Caucasian people on stage to talk about what it's like to be a person of color and how it feels, the discrimination, the stereotyping, etc. Right. But that's still largely a practice with autistic people, is that people that aren't a part of our culture are put on stage to represent us or put on podcasts to talk about us. So I always really encourage to have something about, if something about us is being discussed, to include us in the conversation. So thank you for having me here today.
You are very welcome. It has been such a privilege to have you. I'm so grateful for you to take your time out and to share with us here on the show. Is there anything else that you would like to mention before we wrap up for the day? And how can people get in touch with you if they need to?
Sure. Well, I've got some wonderful communities that you can find on Facebook. If you look under my pen name, Samantha Craft, there's over, I want to say, at least 3,000, mostly women on the autism spectrum or parents like yourself that have connected. And it's a very safe place. Once in a while, I'll post surveys that are out there asking for autistics opinion, an autistic person's opinion. I'll post job openings. It's a way to network with each other. I also have a Facebook page. It's not as I don't frequent it as much as I used to, but it's called Everyday Aspergers. You can find that on Facebook. I have a lot of articles on the workplace and inclusion on LinkedIn under my legal name, Marcelle Champy, and that's